Welcome to the U.S. Mission to the UAE's podcast. I'm your host, Rachel McKeska, Culture and Education Officer here at the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi. Welcome to today's episode, where we delve into the vibrant world of art and its profound ability to communicate human experiences. Our featured artist is a remarkable figure whose work transcends borders and speaks to the heart of contemporary issues. Drawing on her Middle Eastern heritage, she employs bold colors and intricate patterns, creating distinctive shapes and scenes that powerfully illustrate the plight of migrants, immigrants, and refugees. Her mission is clear: to give voice to the voiceless, to heal, and to reflect on our shared humanity. Join us as we explore Helen Zughaib's journey further, her inspirations, challenges faced as an artist navigating multiple cultures, and how she continues to use her platform for advocacy through creativity. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off. Can you share with us how your Middle Eastern heritage influences your artistic style and the themes that you explore through your work?
Yeah, I think because I was born in Lebanon and lived overseas, we were in Iraq and Kuwait, Lebanon again. Growing up in that part of the world, visually, it's so stimulating. And I grew up with art on the walls, art on the floor, art on the table that we ate with. Those patterns, that vibrancy, those colors, that flatness of the pattern, I think you absorb, sort of, even unconsciously. And later on, more purposefully, I employed that as techniques in my work. Conceptually, message, the fact that I'm an Arab American, a lot of the contemporary situations are important to me. And as you said in your introduction of me, your kind introduction of me, I do try to make sense of that. And I'll put this in quotations, a beautiful way, so it is palatable for the viewer, so they can look at the painting and try and understand what I'm trying to say, even if these are hard subjects that I'm trying to depict. But as an Arab American, it's close to my heart. So that's my authentic self trying to come out on my drawing board, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, thank you. In your book, Stories My Father Told Me, what inspired you to combine your paintings with the stories told by your father about life in Syria and Lebanon during the 1930s?
Yeah, I love that. We had 9/11, of course, and as an Arab American, I myself faced quite a lot of backlash about that, as well as the larger community. I was approached by a gallery to do a show, and the night before, my mother had said we should record your father telling his stories, because he's Hakawati, and Hakawati bil Arabi in Arabic mean the storyteller, and he's our storyteller, and he's the patriarch of the family, and this is a very esteemed position, actually. And it's a form of education. And so we grew up with Daddy's stories about village life, about our family, about religious traditions, about how to be a good person, a good member of society. And so I told the director, I said, well, what about if I painted my dad's stories? She said, oh, I'd love that idea. So then the hard task was approaching my father and asking his permission if he would write the stories down, because it's an oral tradition.
Right.
It's not a written tradition. And he promptly told me no. Like a good dad. No. But my mom said, go back to your studio and I'll talk with your father. And he ultimately agreed, though he didn't think that they would have any resonance with a larger, population. And, but what it did, when we had the exhibition, we had the paintings, and he would give me the stories and I would just envision them, and we had them side by side in the exhibition. It was remarkable, because this country is formed of so many people that come from everywhere, and they could see themselves in the paintings, and they started sharing their stories. Whether it was German or Switzerland or Italian, or it didn't matter. Everyone had their own stories of traditions and food that they ate and so on and so forth. That was, it was such a big surprise for me. And it pushed away that negativity. It showed us as we are one people. Yeah, there are differences, but we're more similar than we are not. So it began and lasted several years. I think I began that series in 2003, and I think he gave me the last story in 2015. Wow. And he said, "This is the last one." I'm like, "Daddy, please."
Was it really the last one?
Yeah, it was. He wasn't kidding. I mean, he I don't know the word for it, not patronized, but he accommodated me as much as he could. And then he said, he's done.
Okay.
And I had to respect him. Sadly. It's like, Dad.
So what specific experiences or events in your life have shaped your perspective on cultural diplomacy through art? And I think it might be important for our listeners and viewers to know that you are an amazing American artist who has offered and lent your artworks to ambassadors abroad throughout the world to show in their homes. And we have two of your beautiful pieces at our ambassador's residence here in Abu Dhabi. So I see you as very active in cultural diplomacy and kind of an art envoy and art ambassador, if you will.
Wow. Thank you. That's a very nice title to have. I referenced 9/11. And I think that was a pivotal moment for me because, like, as artists, you want to tell your own story. We're talking about storytelling. We want to tell our own story. We don't want someone saying who we are. And in that way of telling our story, I think that one of the things that was important to me and that you're picking up on in terms of how you can use art as diplomacy, I think art can talk the way politicians cannot talk. It can seep into the cracks and bridge worlds that and create a dialogue that you don't necessarily have when you have other people talking about the situation. So I think I answered that question really well.
So in my world, in the world of cultural diplomacy, we call that soft power.
Soft power.
Right.
I'm going to use that in my next conversation. Yeah, that soft power that can go in our last talk. I was talking almost like not subversive, but in a quiet way with color and pattern, sort of tricking you to look at my piece. And then, you think, it's beautiful, or the patterns or the colors or the detail. And then you could hear my message, what I'm trying to say behind it, I'm trying to bring you as opposed to trying to repel you. Right. So I think that in your world, the diplomatic world, you can view my work as not divisive. And in fact, I'm trying to bring people together. And in my own person, as East and the West, I sort of feel this viscerally. I'm always trying to bring the two sides of me together. Mm-hmm. And I do try and reflect that in my work and create almost a third space, where I'm asking you to come in and I'm asking both the sides to contribute to the conversation, and at least have respect for one another. I'm not asking you to agree with me, but those little tiny movements towards respect, towards understanding, I think are healing and important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I do.
And so, after moving to Washington, D.C., you began painting iconic monuments like the Capitol and the White House, which are featured at the ambassador's residence. What drew you to those subjects, and how do they relate to your broader artistic narrative? I mean, my favorite works that you do are the really kind of folk art, village scenes, the really colorful ones. Mm-hmm. I want to live in that world. That's
me too. I do too. Jump right on that striped donkey and ride away and pick some figs. That's what I want to do.
But I love how you take the same style from those village scenes and apply it to the Capitol and the Washington Monument.
Yeah, I mean, when I first came to Washington, I was astounded by them. And also the fact that as an artist, and I use so much color, that they were so white. And I thought, they could really use some painting. I had dreams of waking up at the nighttime and attacking them with color and pattern, and people waking up the next morning and thinking what happened.
As long as it's red, white, and blue.
Yeah, right. Well, and that you bring that up, but that's also very intentional because, I'm thinking of the American flag, which of course is red, white, and blue. But those monuments, they represent all people coming to this country this country, meaning not Abu Dhabi, but America, coming for a better life, just like my dad, just like my father, many, many people that I know, for these ideals and these hopes that this country was founded on, that are so important. And I thought, wow, these people that are walking around, they're taking these monuments for granted. Whereas I'm coming and looking at them newly and thinking about people like my dad and thinking about people who are coming here that do not take them for granted. So I wanted to sort of reawaken that excitement and the meaning behind those. So I painted with all different kinds of motifs, oriental, all representing different patterns and, from different cultures, using that basic palette of red, white, and blue, just to sort of say, look at these monuments, look at what they represent, and see how truly amazing they are. The buildings, I'm talking about what's behind them and who was behind them. See how lucky you are for being born in this country, whereas most of the world, they don't have access to a lot of that. And I wanted you not to take it for granted, if you know what I'm saying.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. As you're talking, it reminds me, so most of our monuments in Washington are based off of Greek and Roman architecture.
Right.
And I can't help but think about the, the Acropolis in Athens and the Parthenon that originally was painted many different colors. But now, because we only know of them as like brown, gray and white and monuments without the color, that's what we based our architectural style on, that symbolizes the power, the same power that ancient Greece and Rome had.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, if you look at them, they're filled with patterns, and and I got some inspiration from some of those books about how they did Greek and Roman motifs and so on and so forth, in fact, for those paintings.
And then also the incorporation of kind of the mosaic as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which is Eastern and Western, but most,
Yeah.
So, being selected for the 2021-24 inaugural social practice residency at the Kennedy Center is quite an honor.
Huge.
What does this mean to you, and how do you plan to utilize this opportunity?
Oh, it's been something. I thought maybe they had the wrong person, but it's totally amazing, and it was a new initiation for them, and I was their inaugural social impact resident, and my charge, if you will, when they invited me for this residency, was they had seen my work and known about me and my work on refugee issues and displacement and migration issues, and of course we have our own issues in our country on immigration. But brought more broadly from wars, climate change, and so on and so forth, specifically focusing on women and children, because many, many times they're the ones that sort of have to pick up the pieces because the men are fighting or gone, or, so they're the ones that sort of have to keep the family together and find shelter and food and so on and so forth. So I think that was a big reason why I was invited for that residency. And it's been amazing exhibiting there in that space where some people are afraid to walk into a gallery or afraid to walk into a museum. They think, oh, I'm not going to understand it. It's above me.
Elite.
It's so not elite. But people have that idea, but walking into the Kennedy Center to go hear a concert or go see a performance, but wow, they walk through the Hall of Nations, the Hall of States, and they see all my little shoes lined up with my installation, the places they'll go.
Right.
Little kids, whoa, they were trying to touch them, which made me mad. I was like, oh, get your hands off that, my shoes, stop it. But I mean, it brought young people that would nowhere in the world would go into a gallery. I don't care how good the gallery is, that leveling of the viewer was very important, is very important. And I love that the Kennedy Center had that sort of foresight to do that. And they're continuing on the program. So, and giving talks there and so on, and being able to talk about things that are important to me and share it on that mouthpiece is just phenomenal, Yeah, thank you for recognizing that.
So on the topic of depicting migrants, immigrants, and refugees, could you elaborate a little bit on how you balance the emotional weight of these topics, these themes, with the aesthetic qualities of your work?
Yeah, I mean, we referenced it a little bit. It's incredibly hard. As the years have gone on and I'm focusing on world events, it is very difficult to not cry all the time, and feel helpless and hopeless in the face of much. In my own little world, in my studio, I feel like I can control one thing, what's on my drawing board with my little brush. And I feel powerful at that time. I am going to start crying. Thank you very much. I won't, but I feel like it right now because it is kind of the only moment when I feel like my brush is power. It's a little bit of power, at least for this canvas, at least for this time, at least for the story that I want to tell. And so I feel like I'm responsible. I feel like I have a responsibility to talk for people who can't talk, or for people who think that they're forgotten. I just spoke about the little Syrian boy. I don't know if you heard that in my little conversation upstairs, but the little Syrian boy, Aylan Kurdi, who was washed up on the... Remember that photograph? Which riveted the world for 2 minutes, And he was a little Syrian boy. He was 3 years old. He and his father were trying to escape in the Mediterranean. And unfortunately, his father survived, but he did not. And he was washed up on the shore, and a Turkish soldier actually found him. And it really became a sort of a reference point for an enormous problem. The war, but also people trying to flee from the war, and which of course we face all the time. And so I really questioned whether or not, as an artist, I should depict that in my series on migration, which I now have 52 paintings.
Right.
Yeah. And I had a photograph of little Aylan in my studio beside my drawing board, and I would think about it. I was like, I don't want to feel like I'm using him in a way. And many artists depicted him. Ai Weiwei, the famous dissident artist, he built a big sculpture in the sand, reproduction of him, and he laid down beside that. And I just thought, well, I'm going to do it because that little boy represents a big part of the story. And if we don't write it down, if we don't document it, if we don't paint about it, how can we learn? How can the future generations, we have to look back, and we go looking back, so we try not to make the same mistakes. Well, I think we do, but we don't seem to learn humanity. But I feel, and so then I decided I'm taking on this responsibility.
It's a big responsibility.
And I'm not going to forget him. So I would come down to my studio and I would speak to him. I cried. I was crying when I was painting that. And I said to him, Habibi, I'm not going to forget you. I'm not going to forget you. And I talked to him the whole time, and I painted him. And then later on, it was on exhibit, and the German curator was with me. And this is a long answer to your question, and just pull that thing off. But I'll then film me. And he was looking at it, and I didn't know that was painting he was focusing on. And he turned away, and I didn't know him very well. He'd come to meet me, and he was crying. And I said, "Oh, Sebastian, what's wrong?" And he said, "I forgot about that." And he said, "Thank you for painting it." And I was thinking, wow, that's why I painted it, because it's already forgotten. And then he went back to Germany, and a couple months later, he said, Helen, I thought about you because we had one of those rescue boats that goes out, a rescue boat for the migrants, goes out in the water. And he said they renamed it Aylan Kurdi after the little boy, the little Syrian boy.
Wow.
And he said, I thought of you. So I don't know what that is. It made me feel a little bit better in a situation I can't control, you know. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that.
That's a long answer to your question. Sorry.
That was a very, very honest and emotional, heartfelt answer.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
So finally, if listeners could take away one key message about the power of art, and I think you've given us a lot of examples here, in fostering cross-cultural understanding, what would it be?
Just don't give up. I think art, I really do. I'm not sounding trite or Pollyannish. I think it gives me hope. And I hope that what I do and what other artists do provide that hope, even if it's beauty, even if it's a moment of respite from the world. I think that's what art can do. I think that's what music can do. I think that's what the creative arts can do. And I think that's humanity at its best.
Absolutely.
Really, it really is. And like I said, learning from the Louvre the other day, the little quote, art is the shortest path from man to man. You can't say it better than that.
Right.
You know, I don't know who that quote was in English and Arabic, and I just thought, well, that's really perfect. It's the shortest path.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. Thank you so much, Helen Zughaib.
Gee, thank you.
I encourage our listeners to explore Helen's work further by visiting her website at hzughaib.com. That's HZUGHAIB.com. Thank you for joining us today,
Thank
Helen.
you for
And
having
Thank you
me.
for coming to Abu Dhabi to share this with us.
It's been amazing.
Yes, we've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.